Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm joined today by I'm your host, Taqib Musa, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Abdus Samir Arjuman.
Assalamu alaikum.
And we are joined by a very illustrious guest, Talha Ghannam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Who has traveled a long, long way to be here today. So Talha is
to give him the context,
to be the founder. Talha is the founder of the QuranClub app.
Yes.
And he's a born and bred Solihalite, which some would
Silhillian.
say Solihillian.
Silhillian.
See, he's so proper that he even knows the word for it.
Although I wasn't born here.
Were you not? Okay.
No.
So you're not as posh as Solihull might make you sound.
Technically, no.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I mean, he's still quite posh, so that's good. And
define posh.
I don't know.
The thing is,
we'll discuss.
The fact that we thought you were born here.
The fact that I'm lived here for most of my life probably suggests why you thought I was born here. But there's no particular.
I don't know. Surely it's the accent and pronouncing
listen to the way,
of certain
listen
words.
to the way he enunciates.
Yeah,
listen
exactly.
to the way he. You're a very well-spoken person.
No more than you are.
Oh no, this is me putting it on just to try and match you.
The
The listeners know how it really sounds.
Abdus Samir is from East London. He chills with the Whitechapel roadmans.
Exactly.
I went to Whitechapel the other day. It's definitely gentrified.
Yeah, it's changing. It's just
Not the
that's happening
Whitechapel
for
was
all
before.
of all of London. But
yeah.
Abdus Samir is from Whitechapel before it gentrified. He's
Even better. So he's the millionaire that benefit
no.
from the
benefit from taxpayer money. But also more about
not
Talha.
that again. So we're going to end those jokes now.
They're not. I mean, let's be honest. JSA is fine for people who need it, but if you use it like Abdus Samir to buy yourself German executive sedans, then we have a problem. But anyways, so Talha has done many different he's been participating in various scholarly circles, activism circles, and we're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive into Talha's life. And then come back out and talk in more detail about...
the skeletons are buried. You're not coming out.
It's fun.
We found some stuff on Google.
Yeah, we found some very interesting stuff on Google. So if you guys want to Google him, up to you. But anywho, just before actually, I want to mention...
And Abdus Samir got shocked by Talha's real age because he thought he was much younger because he looked so young.
But yeah, he looks very young compared to his actual age.
Mashallah.
It's up to you to reveal. Yeah, no pressure. But I just want to say...
All the audience need to know is that I'm taken.
What he really means is that there's 3 more spots open.
My wife is one of the other listeners on this podcast.
I'm so sorry.
She's going to walk upstairs now.
Talha has to dissociate quite publicly from this statement.
Can I just say to my wife as well that don't worry, there's only one in my mind.
Anyways, he says that, but you know,
He says that, but he also notices he has 4 fingers.
So Talha, QuranClub, tell us a little bit before we all get in too much trouble. QuranClub, tell us a little bit about the concept. It's a very kind of different type of Quran reading app. So
the idea of the QuranClub is to create a digital community or a social media for Muslims. So Muslims have a very strong identity with their faith. They very strongly identify with one another as brothers, as a single body through the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But yet there's no place online for us to convene or meet together. So people have tried it. They've tried to create a Muslim Facebook, a halal tube, and these things.
Ion Flicks.
And yeah, so...
does that exist?
It does.
Yeah, it's still live, but I think they stopped putting new content on there.
But I don't think an identity alone is enough to bring us together. I think you need to have a tangible action, an input that is very authentic within our faith. And there's nothing more authentic than reading Quran together, as established in the Prophet's ﷺ's hadith of Bukhari, where people come together. He praises people who come together in the houses of God to read Quran together and to study it together. So we premised our existence on that. If we can build a community to read Quran together, then we can hopefully create a space for Muslims that's authentic on our own terms online. And then hopefully when that grows, we can begin to offer various kind of products and services for that community that they need. So from education to e-commerce to travel and all these other things. So it's quite exciting. But the hope is, on the first step, is that Muslims can really buy into it, commit to reading one verse a day. And what that does is it helps us complete the Quran thousands of times each day across the world. So since we launched 2 months ago, we've read around 70,000 pages of Quran, around 700,000 verses, and we're getting around over 100 downloads a day. So it's growing, and people are spreading it, which is great. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, alhamdulillah, that's great. But let's start the deep dive and start digging.
I want to ask. This is an amazing project, but I want to know more about the individual behind the project.
Okay.
So where did this journey start?
So the app started, if that's what you meant, it started 4 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, as a WhatsApp group. There was a Productive Muslim article that went out, and it encouraged people to set up WhatsApp groups of friends to send a verse of Quran, and then once you've read it, you have to confirm with the group that you've read it to encourage one another. So when I first heard about it, my gut reaction was, oh, not another WhatsApp group. So I didn't like that reaction, because I was like, this is the Quran, and we really should be encouraging people to read the Quran, and we should be enthusiastic about it. So I volunteered to do it. So it started off with 20 friends, and then I thought, if I'm doing it for 20, what more effort does it take to send it to a few more people? So I sent a message round, and that grew within 1 day to 500. Then I posted it online, and then it went to 5,000. And then now we've got around 20,000 people on that group that we're sending messages every day of Quran. But that became quite unsustainable, because WhatsApp is not the most flexible piece of software. So we decided to build an app. And that journey has taken us to where we are now, which was about 4 years of building it. And it's been difficult. We've got funded by donations, because we're a social enterprise. And we're trying to get or keep our social purpose in mind when we're building and growing this. So we get investment offers, but so far we've resisted, because we want to keep it with its social purpose in mind. And the challenge has been scaling the app and making it cope with up to 5 million people, because our previous launch of our pilot was very successful. So that's the basic introduction to how we got to where we are with the app at the moment.
Okay, alhamdulillah. We'll go into a little bit detail of some of the features and stuff later. But going back to you, so you said you were born, I think, in Birmingham somewhere, or?
I was born in North Wales.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you moved.
I only admitted that when they got to the semi-finals of, what was it, the European Cup at the time? And then I was like, I'm Welsh.
So you're Welsh when it suits you.
I'm Welsh when it suits me.
But how long did you stay there before you moved?
5 years. So all my memories are in kind of Solihull, which is where I live now. And alhamdulillah, for those of people who come, I describe to them as this place is like Jannah. So they have to leave the dunya of London to come up to the Jannah of
Can I just say,
take that,
London is the best place in the world, and there is no place like London.
Yeah, but those in the dunya think it's the best place in the world until they leave and venture into.
Are you trying to say that Birmingham's the akhirah?
Not Birmingham. No, because
just Solihull.
Because Solihull, like Jannah, is surrounded by what? By tribulation. So, Birmingham and these places.
Oh, exactly.
I'm going to get killed by my Birmingham friends.
What you're saying is Birmingham is like the Sirat, and then when you walk over it, then you get...
I could say the same thing about London. Like the M25 is the thing which everything outside of it is just the tribulations, the fitan. And then once you go through the Midlands and through the north and through the other way around, to be honest, through the north and through the Midlands, and you enter Jannah.
Basically, you just acknowledge that Solihull is Jannah. So it's okay.
So once you've
fine.
crossed the north and the Midlands, then you enter Solihull. If you go too far, then you get to London, which is terrible. But okay, so you moved to Solihull then, and was this something? So what were your school years like? Did you do anything interesting, like advice?
So my parents have always been very active. They've got a very active community here in Solihull. They've been teaching at a Sunday school for as long as I've known, so ever since I was born. And alhamdulillah, we've got a Sunday school here with over 300 kids. They do a weekly study circle. They've got a lot of activities for the youth group boys, youth group girls, a lot of Islamic education. So this, as a community, is probably one of the best in the UK from my experiences, and it kind of certainly helped nurture my Islamic identity. to be someone who's confident and knowledgeable about my faith. And that's why a lot of people who did grow up here do tend to move back, especially when they have kids, because it's difficult to find that kind of nurturing environment. And so on. And my parents always encouraged me to be out there and be involved with my faith. So it's not just something that is you and the prayer mat, but it's something that's very much beyond the four walls of the house, and engaging with people and so on. So yeah, that one thing led to another. And then my brother and sister were very involved in Phocis back in the day, before what it is now. And
shout out to Phocis, Federation of Student Islamic Society.
Phocis have always been at the forefront of representing Muslim students and serving ISOC, so a huge shout out to Phocis.
Inshallah. So my sister set up SAC, Student Affairs Committee. So she was one of the first people to go to the NUS conference. Her and a guy called Hassan Patel. So they went there, and there was 2 Muslim delegates at NUS, and they were like, "Why is there no one else here?"
Yeah.
And then it just ballooned. And my brother set up all the regional units of Phocis. So the whole Midlands, London stuff didn't exist before then. But then they advised me, don't do the Muslim stuff. Go mainstream and learn that way, because they're far more advanced in their education and training. So I went through UK Youth Parliament, got elected, ran various different things. Then I worked as a youth consultant, travelled the country talking to people about how to do youth work. And then from there, I somehow managed to arc my way back into the Muslim community. So I came into it in a different angle. So there was
with this UK youth stuff. Did you find yourself in I think one of the things that and I kind of appreciate that is that Muslims need to look outward, and we need to look towards the whole of the British community rather than just kind of serving ourselves or with our businesses and stuff like that. Sometimes they're a bit inward looking. But what kind of stuff did you what did you do as a consultant? You were advising what different.
Do you know the one thing that surprised me at the time anyway was the amount of money that they have that we just haven't tapped into. So there was a pot of money for Solihull, £250,000 to give to youth group projects, that you can build stuff. And then there was a £50,000 pot of money for activities, and we were completely unaware of it. So I got on the commissioning board for that as kind of a youth kid and organised some stuff for our local youth group. I also was part of a £10 million Actions Speak Louder project that
were
was
you
by
the only Muslim on there? Or?
No, there were other Muslims from other places, but they were involved as part of their local council, bringing in youth groups involved, as opposed to someone who's actively a Muslim identity. So I had that Islamic identity because my dad gives khutbah every week and is the local imam. And I kind of was very strongly Muslim, but I was going into a non-Muslim space, and I remember finding that very odd. But kind of learning how to defend your ideals and values. So it's kind of a lot of very interesting things. Because a lot of
people are very scared, even with reading books and stuff. People are very I can't read this because I'm going to lose my deen.
Yeah.
So do you think it's and at what point do you think one can be confident enough that they've established their foundation, that they can go out there? Because I'm assuming you were a 15, 16-year-old guy hanging out with many different people, different influences. Whereas a lot of Muslims try to shelter their kids from it, and they're to the age of 15, 16, they've never when they come to university, it's the first time they're in a class with members of the opposite gender.
I mean, I don't think it's a point you reach. I think you need to have a connection with someone throughout that time. So it's not like you get a certain qualification and I'm ready and then I can go out and by myself. So for me, it wasn't like somebody pointed it out. I was still very young, and I still remember some horror stories of things happening and people trying to do stuff. I was very naive. I remember one time kind of just being completely...
Skeletons are coming out.
Yeah, this is no, there's a lot of stuff I'm not going to tell you in this podcast, but just learning of certain, let's say, orientations of people from kind of different communities and different youth and different backgrounds, and kind of how they think and feel and interactions and stuff. So, I used to think if someone's a hijabi, then they the most religious, pious, kind of they're going to be praying and stuff. But then you see a hijabi's got a boyfriend, and you're like, okay, that doesn't make sense in my head. And I thought, if you're a Muslim, then you must pray. Just because that's what Muslims do because of the hadith, بيننا وبينهم الصلاة فمن تركها فقد كفر. Like, it's a huge
you
thing.
go around shouting at someone, is that?
I remember
Maybe.
asking. I remember this guy had a huge Maulvi beard, like a massive one, and you can see he was outwardly kind of wore a hat and stuff, but he never prayed. And apparently, he never had tahara, like he was never pure.
Whoa.
So he would always just say to me, "Oh, bro, I would do, but I can't pray." And I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, it's like I didn't really get what he meant." He's like, he's not cleaned himself properly and whatever." So he'd never pray. And I was just thinking, that doesn't make sense. So you meet people of different types and different things, but I think you do need a strong grounding. I think with the community here, what we've done successfully is kind of we train the youth very well in terms of answering their theological questions and the difficult struggles. So, for example, we could take them through all these questions like, why is there suffering in the world? And, why are there no two gods or multiple of these things? So they're really prepared from a theological perspective. So when they do go out to universities and stuff, they tend to be the ones that lead a lot of the ISOCs and lead a lot of the activity, which is good. But to answer your question, I don't think there is a point of which you've got ijazah to go out to people. I think it's when you do and you do get involved in that, just make sure you have a connection to somebody who can keep you grounded.
So like an imam or some elder locally who you can speak to.
Right.
Yeah.
So one reason why, when you mentioned how your siblings are part of Phocis and they kind of set up the SAC team, so that, for those who are not aware, SAC stands for the
Student Affairs Committee.
Student Affairs Committee, sorry. I'm going to get killed by the current VP SAC, who's a very close friend of mine. So, anywho, I myself, alhamdulillah, a couple of years ago, I first started getting involved in student politics as well myself. And that was only through at that time, who was the brother who was the VP SAC. And through that, I was able to kind of engage within NUS politics as well, slightly within my own students' union. And I realized, like, not just the whole kind of idea of exposing yourself to the world out there, but also the aspect of the lack of Muslim representation. And sometimes you'd be in conversations where, at least now, alhamdulillah, because of the way how arguments and narratives have been formed, it's a bit more easier to fight for the Muslim cause, i.e. in terms of whether it be Islamophobia on campuses or wherever it may be, the issues then. When you were, at that time, when you were in the UK Youth Parliament and 15, 16, 17, especially, I'm assuming those are the times where things were turned towards the Muslim community, especially after 9/11, especially after 7/7. How did you find your experiences when it came to like representing Muslim interests? In terms of, were you yourself ever like hit with Islamophobia from a young age, and how did it kind of impact you as well?
I mean, bear in mind when all this happened, I was very young, so I was about 13, 14. We used to run our youth group. My dad, behind the scenes, would help us, but we got a lot of exposure to organising stuff when we were young. But my sister, when she was at university, they ran the first ever Muslim student survey. And now she's, mashallah, very gifted at creating PR and networking and so on. And it got a lot of media traction. And it really put Phocis on the map and went forwards. And a lot of the activities that my brother did in Phocis, I was kind of dragged along to do. So the very first Phocis trailer was made by me. So if you ever look at it up, it was before people ever really started doing video editing. So people were like, wow, this kind of thing. And I remember I watched all the historic videos from Phocis and pulled together this speakers tour video that we did on Phocis and stuff. So I was exposed in that when I was quite young. Oddly, I've never really experienced Islamophobia directly. So I've never had someone come up to me and say, you Paki, or you something like this, until very recently, where kind of somebody said to me, go back to your own country, which was quite a shock. But traditionally I've had people who
go back to Wales. Go back to North Wales.
You
Welshman.
Exactly. So what was it, that joke, this hijabi was wearing, or niqabi was talking to her children in the bus, and this guy said, go back to your own country, and he goes, you're speaking Welsh and this is my country.
He said something like, these people should speak English because this is the UK, and they were like, mate, he's speaking
I'm in Wales, I'm speaking Welsh.
Yeah.
I'm speaking Welsh.
So,
Anywho, but going back to the conversation.
Yeah, so I've always been confident, and maybe I give people the benefit of the doubt, but when they ask questions that may seem to somebody as quite confrontational, I'll just treat it as something that maybe they're just inquiring. And often, so I've had somebody say to me, astaghfirullah, but they say something like, the Prophet Muhammad is a paedophile. And that's a very aggravating question. But you can twist that and turn it into something that actually can be quite a positive discussion around where did you get that from, how is this based from, and kind of addressing the underlying questions. And I think with da'wah, especially with these sorts of things, it's about knowing your stuff as well and knowing how to answer these people when it comes to these sorts of things. So mentioning about the various opinions surrounding the age and what that means as well. So I've been fortunate in that a lot of the places I've been to, I've also, because of my complexion, I suppose, I can blend in relatively easy. Apart from my name, I tend to be thought of as Greek when I was growing up, so most people thought I was Mediterranean. So most people did not think I was Muslim unless I told them. But I would always openly say, I need to pray, and I'd never shy away from that.
Okay, but that's quite interesting that people think you're Greek. That's cool, but it's not too far from, it's probably only a few hundred miles off.
As I learned when I went to Cyprus, I went with the British Commonwealth as a delegate to Cyprus, and whilst I was there, I took all the other delegates. It was a youth conference. I took them all to the mosque to show them around, and there was this guy who was very, let's say, enthusiastic or more aggressive, and it was fine. I mean, I just kind of navigated. I told him there's the mosque and whatever. What I now suspect, because 3 days later, the Syrian Mukhabarat came knocking on my uncle's house in Syria, inquiring as to who this Talha Ghannam is and what's he doing in Cyprus. So I'm pretty sure the one that's always the most suspicious is usually the one that is the spy. So he had informed Syria that there's this British-Syrian guy in Cyprus, and they went around Syria finding out who I was and what I was doing in Cyprus.
Wow.
So,
that's quite scary.
But they got to your cousin, so they have good enough data to...
They got to my uncle, They knocked on our house. They're like, who's this guy? And what's he doing? Coincidentally, I haven't been back since then, since that incident. And then this kind of whole conflict started, and I've not been able to go back. But so that tells you a bit about how the Syrian government operates.
Yeah. So where'd you go to university, and what was did you get involved with Islamic activism and?
So when I went to the London School of Economics at LSE, which was a bit of a shock because no one outside of London really knows what that is in the Muslim community, and no one really studies economics. So you do medicine, and that's what you do, or you do accounting, but this is a social science university, so it doesn't register on the map of engineering or kind of.
Plus, everybody thinks that economics is very you can only go into a finance role from that. But we've got people changing that narrative. There's a Millionaire Muslim podcast that Islamic finance guru have started, so shout out to them.
And to be honest, there's a lot of people who actually started off at LSE who are going into this work, mashallah. They've got very good kind of an alumni network. So when I was London chair in Phocis, my vice brother was actually from LSE himself, and he just told me different stories about a different kind of alumni member who's kind of done a startup, and mashallah, he's doing really well for himself as well. So it's definitely a very. I love that university. So
it's great. I probably know who you're talking about. It's Tanim Zaman from Golden Touch Academy.
Yes, I'm talking about him.
So he was the first year, and I was in my third, and I ended up living with him for a bit as well. He's an amazing guy. So shout out to them as well. But so just went to LSE. Really enjoyed my time there. The Muslim community there is incredible, probably one of the best you'll get, and the alumni network is brilliant. But I actually went in there again with the intention of not really doing the Phocis ISOC stuff. I went to do the society NUS stuff. So the first thing I went for was NUS delegate, which I got elected for. But then I was kind of strong-armed into doing the ISOC presidency role.
Of course you were.
So do you know when they come up to you and they're like, Talha, the ummah is going to collapse if you don't become vice president?
That's how
it's a typical way.
Every Muslim organization recruits.
So there was
it's the only way.
I still remember.
It's the emotional blackmail. If you don't take this up, it's an amana. The iman of every single Muslim inside LSE is in your hands.
So three people. Allah bless them. They're really good friends actually. But one sister at the time, and two brothers. They took me down. They're like, look, if you don't do this, the world will collapse. And then there was like another conversation afterwards, and I was like, oh, do I have to do this role? But it's actually probably one of the best things that I did, actually, alhamdulillah, because not for any necessarily positive reasons at the time, but some major incidents happened at that time, let's say, and the spotlight was on London ISOCs, and the spotlight specifically was on LSE, because a particular person got accused in the media of being a terrorist or grooming terrorists. He actually won a libel case. He got like 70 grand out of it. He was like an LSE professor, and he gave khutbah every now and then. And they were like, this guy's preaching hate. And he was like, I'm literally preaching what I teach in my classes. So if I have an issue with it, then so is the university. But that really was like a baptism of fire. And there was also the whole student fees issues then.
Did you guys get a lot of support from the university, or was it like kind of you guys
for that particular thing? Yeah, so I was quite close to the administration, and they were very helpful. Although it was a very turbulent year, because that was the same year they were raising tuition fees from 3,000 to 9,000, and we, as the ISOC, were kind of at the forefront of that campaign. So we'd help organise the march. So, for example, the National Students' March started at LSE, and it went down, and we were kind of really a part of that. So that whole term was just kind of full on with lots of stuff that we had to manage.
I don't know if it was that year where people got a lot of flack for it, because I think they tend to kind of label even demonstrators and stuff as the same thing. Or was that 2009 when they started them initially, where there was a bit of like apparently some of the student protests were on the news for a bit?
That was the year when they went to Conservative headquarters and smashed it up. And I remember, because you couldn't really tell where they were going, so you just follow the crowd, and then you arrive at this building that you realise and there's like a fire in the middle, and there's people smashing windows, and you're kind of like, okay, this is the wrong guy.
There.
He was there, exactly.
I turned around and walked back, but
he did.
I do know. I do know people who were in the building, but they were just kind of there out of curiosity, rather than the one smashing anything. So I think all the people...
I think it's just that mob culture. Like, in the moment, you do something incredibly stupid as like a collective group. And if you were all there individually... But anyway, yeah, people got a lot of flack for that, even though I think it was one small part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that you were involved in that. And then how do you transition from kind of LSE to kind of working life and then switching to community enterprise?
So for me, I was sitting in a lecture, and they were talking about finance. I did a finance module as part of my degree, and they were talking about futures, options, shorts, and all the other instruments you hear. And I was kind of like, wow, like we've been just thinking interest is haram, and then there's like all these other stuff that no one even knows about. And it was shortly after the economic crash as well. So I joined university at the midst of the economic crash. It was 2008. So whilst I was sitting there, I was like, we really need a place or a thing to set up to tackle this stuff. So I joined an organisation which was called MHSN at the time. We turned it into the Centre for Islam and Medicine, or CIM for short. And that organisation was kind of a vision of, we need to set up an institution that looks into and researches contemporary issues to try and understand them from Islam, because you can't do it as an individual role. You have to do it as an institution, as an organised body, because that's how things flourish going forward, and it allows for academic discussions and so on. So alhamdulillah, that was great. We laid the groundwork. I then went to a strategy consulting job in LEK Consulting, which is kind of a kind of a specialist mid-tier strategy house, kind of very amazing experience. And I did that for 2.5 years. But the plan for that was always to gain the experience and then go and do my own thing. So whilst I was there, the plan was basically get the experience, learn about how to build a strategy for the community. And then there, I came up with this 3-pronged idea, which is the intellectual, spiritual, and economic revivals that we need. So we looked into what aspects we need for each of those. So the intellectual became the CIM, this idea of setting up this institution to research contemporary issues.
So
the
CIM focuses on
it looks at
ethical issues from in the medical world from an Islamic legal perspective.
So as an example, organ donation is now going to be opt-in as opposed to opt-out instead of opt-in, and the law is changing. And what do we think as a community around that?
On the register, and then they have to actively
So there's particular details, and I don't want to misconstrue it, because there is still choice in the matter.
Yeah.
But the assumption is the patient is okay with it, and then the family confirm that or not afterwards. And that's an issue that people have forever had kind of lack of clarity around. But that's just like the beginning of it. Like, there's issues that have been debated in Parliament around what is the legal ruling around a baby that has 3 genetic parents. So they take the sperm of the male, they take an egg of a female. The egg of the female has a genetic disease, so they replace a part of it, the mitochondria, with an egg of another female. So you now have a baby with genes of 3 separate parents. What does Islam say about inheritance law around that, about parentship, about who is the one has the right to raise it, and so on and so forth? We're not even on that level to discuss it. I mean, the Catholic Church, I think it was, produced like a 60-page research document into the various things around it. We had like a half-page fatwa, which was like haram, and it's just like, wait, what? And with a very simple binary idea. But then there's other things around mental health. How do we understand or come to terms with issues of mental health in the community? How do we understand issues of rights and as a patient and autonomy, and what is personhood, and what part is a person, especially with things like AI? So these are really questions that we all will be affected by, but no one is really thinking about or really addressing. So the vision of the CIM is to create a place for these discussions to take place. So as a community, we can bring scholars together and just say, look, present your research and work on this, and we can have a discussion. So we had a masterclasses series, which was very successful and continuing, actually. And we discussed kind of from beginning of life. We did a genetics conference, which was very well received.
So you have further, and you're still involved with that?
Yeah, so I'm a trustee in that. I set it up. We built the financial basis for the organisation, then we hired a director, and I stepped into the trustee role, and then I moved on to working for the QuranClub full time.
Okay, so alhamdulillah. So that's quite interesting, and you guys still have some seminars and master classes ongoing.
Yep.
About these issues, so people can find that online.
Yeah, so we'll be doing a fundraising thing for that soon, to kind of put a bit more financial capital into the organisation. So do look out for that as well.
Inshallah. Okay, very nice. So you said you're doing QuranClub full time. So what did you do before? Were you working at CIM full time or something else?
So I was working at CIM full time. Left that, and then I do this now. And
okay, so as soon as you left uni, you started up CIM, and that's been your
basically. No, as soon as I left uni, we started up CIM part-time, and I was working for LEK for 2.5 years.
Who's LEK?
The consulting firm that I mentioned.
So you were a management consultant?
A strategy consultant, yeah.
Okay, very nice. And you gave that kind of your corporate life up to focus full-time on social enterprise?
And the idea is you either do that at the beginning of your life or the end of your life. So I chose to do it at the beginning because it's the easiest.
And how did your parents take it? Because, mashallah, stable job, everything, living the dream.
My parents, alhamdulillah, have always been very open-minded. I mean, they have their worries, but if you can tell them this is the plan, and they see that you have a plan, they'll kind of support you through that. So I saved up. I had an income through the CIM at the time, and it was like, okay, this is what I was going to do. I put money in smart places to be able to accrue more income whilst I was away, and I just shaved a lot of my costs in terms of what I spend money on. It's not been easy. It's not something simple, but if you want to do this and you're passionate about it, then you kind of think, I want to give it a shot, because the worst that can happen is I just lose the savings I earned over those 2-3 years, and I just go back to square one, which is not. I'd much rather that than the regret of never having tried.
Yes, I think that's really kind of, because a lot of people get into, especially after uni, they have a lot of ideas, and then they get into like a stable job, and they're like, okay, I can't leave it. And I think you mentioned something about investments. So you had some investments that were giving you income. So what kind of things would you recommend that people can go into to kind of, because I think the reason I mention that is because I think it's important to present it as like a responsible decision. Don't just jump off a cliff and expect your parents or your family to catch you.
There's actually a point before that, which is you don't have to just jump off the cliff. You can prepare the plane, and you can actually glide down, slowly transitioning between the jobs. So I was actually already started the project before I left, so I had something existing to jump into as opposed to leaving and thinking about it. But different people do it different ways. But the key thing is the biggest asset becomes your time, because your time is what is going to decide how quickly you move on to something else, because you'll kind of get fed up or you'll run out of money or whatever. So you've got this kind of clock ticking. So the moment you leave your job, that clock begins ticking. And unless you move on or find something soon, then you might run out of time. So yeah, I mentioned Golden Touch Academy. A friend of mine, I wish they existed when I first left, but it allows you to really create a passive income. So you put your money into places which give you 10, 20% return. And if you work for 2-3 years, you can save up kind of a decent amount of money, and then you just get 20% off 50,000, which is what, £10,000 a year, and that more than comfortably covers your income, and it's still below the tax threshold. So it kind of really works well from that perspective. So he's really pushing that.
I'm just saying, it's quite interested in that.
You know what, can I speak to you after this podcast finishes? Yeah?
We've got our own investment thing for the QuranClub, which is doing 100% return over 3 years. So that's something we're working on at the moment. But the idea is creating halal investment mechanisms. So the smart people are the ones who are smart with their money. So you can build a certain amount of capital through your work. But the other thing I wanted to mention, which is very important, is everyone's circumstances are different. So I came from a background where my father's a doctor and they weren't dependent on me financially. And I think that's very important, because I have got friends whose families are dependent on them and they've got various other circumstances, be it health or be it knowledge or whatever. I kind of felt like I was dealt the perfect hand and I was refusing to play my cards. So I need to, if I don't do this, who will? And I think that ran through my mind a lot. So it was not a question of will it work? It was kind of, if I don't do it, no one else has got a better set of kind of cards. It's like you got the aces and you're refusing to put it down. So there's always a risk. Someone might play it otherwise. But there's a quote by Rumi. I think they always say it's kind of, you chase after that which is written, and then you forget to work for that which is yet to be earned, which is the thing that's written is this dunya and your risk. It's already, you will earn what has already been written for you. It's just the question of you working hard, and Jannah hasn't been earned yet. It's yet to be written through your actions, and we neglect it. So those kind of things were kind of quite important for me when I made that decision.
Can't believe you used a poker reference, but we'll let that one slide.
It's fine.
Part of the skeletons.
I think just before when I first met Talha, I said that he looked much younger than he actually is. Although now that I'm speaking to him, he definitely feels. I can definitely see why people say, "Are you the eldest in your family?" Because mashallah, the amount of wisdoms that are coming out of you right now, mashallah, like. So may Allah reward you immensely and preserve you immensely for everything that you've done. And definitely have been an inspiration to many, and I hope that many people can benefit. I just want to ask you a question. Because alhamdulillah, you left university, you were working in consultancy, and I think this kind of question sometimes pops up for a lot of young Muslims who are especially involved in ISOC work or just Islamic activism work. They kind of get drawn into the thing of, some of them anyway, that okay, should I kind of start giving back to my community now, or should I start actually going into the the corporate sector and then go back to the Muslim sector? And the thing is, when you look at your peers, because naturally speaking, you compare yourself to your peers, you compare yourself to the people who are in the same class as you, and you start looking at them and you're thinking, okay, wow, this person's gone into the corporate sector, they're on a job which has a high 5-figure or even a 6-figure salary. They've got this many benefits, whereas I'm basically stuck here working in the masjid on a decent kind of 5-figure salary, but with 0 benefits. And it's as if I sacrificed what I could have been for the community. Which do you understand? Sometimes they feel like, okay, have I made the right decision? Have I not made the right decision? So, what kind of would you say that there is a compromise? Would you say that as long as you can kind of plan your time wisely or plan your life wisely, I guess?
I think there's certain things that Allah has set out in the sense of this fard ayn, fard kifaya, and the idea is that this is a fard, but it's directly for me to fulfill, and there's a fard which is for the community to fulfill. And I think the first thing is your duty as a man or a woman or a son or a daughter, a father or mother, is to look after your immediate family and to make sure their sustenance is okay. And I think a lot of people undermine how important that is and how spiritually virtuous that is. So you must make sure that you are looking after your family and your parents and they're all okay, because that's your first duty in your immediate circle. The second thing is that a lot of things aren't mutually exclusive. So there's a whole talk I do about this idea of small deeds being the most virtuous. People want to do this momentous thing, and it's not that at all. There's a hadith of Sayyidina Bilal where the Prophet ﷺ said, what action did you do that you are most hopeful for? Because I heard your sandals in paradise, I heard your footsteps, i.e. he's already been promised paradise. So you think, what would Sayyidina Bilal have done that would merit this great guarantee of paradise? Like, would it be the torture he endured under Umayyah ibn Khalaf that became famous of his patience? Would it be the immense kind of commitment he had to giving the adhan every morning, such that his voice became synonymous with the adhan of the Prophet? Would it be the fact that he rose from being a slave of African descent, black skin, to be someone who's so close, and to show that the equality within our faith? Is it any of those actions? What did Sayyidina Bilal say? He said, well, I don't think it's any action that I'm more hopeful of than the fact that when I lose my wudu, I do wudu again. And then when I've done wudu again, I pray 2 rakah sunnah. And you think, wait, why would you mention that out of everything? And the Prophet confirmed that that's the action. And you realize actually change comes in small actions. And I think that's the essence of the QuranClub. It's the idea of we can make a significant change in the world by just small deeds that we do. And these small things will transform society. So I think any advice I give to people is start with the small things. There's an advice I give to people: you should always have some form of education or knowledge that you're attending. You should always be learning something in your faith. You should never stop that. It shouldn't stop when you leave madrasa. You should always be attending some circle. You should always be doing some form of worship, extra than what is required. So not just your 5 prayers, but doing something extra. Be it fasting, being qiyam al-layl, standing at night at prayer or whatever, reading Quran. You should always be giving some level of charity, even if it's small. You should give it consistently, because that's when these things have an impact. And you should always be doing some form of activism, so something that's outward to the community, helping people. The Prophet ﷺ, when he advised people in Medina when they arrived, what were the actions that he said? He says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ أَفْشُوا السَّلَامِ وَأَطْعِمُوا الطَّعَامِ وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ بِسَلَامٍ. So he said 3 actions. He didn't say come pray. He said, look, send salams to one another, have a social relationship, because that is key in any success. And feed poor people and pray at night, and you'll enter paradise with ease. Yeah. And there's a lot of kind of deep wisdom behind that kind of as an axiom of our life.
And I think that's very, because it's so consistent. You said about the actions as well, the khairul a'mali, I think it's what adwamuha wa inqal. The best of the actions are the most constant or consistent of them, even if they're small. But it's like that discipline can translate into other aspects of your life as well. Yeah. So do you think that attitude is something, because you're working pretty much for yourself. I don't know why I said pretty much, but you're working for yourself. It's very hard to kind of, because I'm assuming you don't have a strict 9 to 5 meeting based schedule, so you have to get out of bed every day and force it. And you said, you've got that ticking time clock of like when you started off, when you took the leap of faith and jumped from your job to do CIM and then QuranClub. How do you keep yourself motivated, and what advice can you give any of our listeners who might be trying to do something like that themselves? How do you stay disciplined?
There's a lot of truth in, if you enjoy what you do, then you really won't see it as a job. But there's always, I'll caveat that slightly, there's always elements of a job that you just won't enjoy doing. Like, I still don't like sitting there having to do admin or writing long documents and stuff. It's not pleasant. But when you have, for me, my life is getting people to read Quran. I mean, there's very few people who can enjoy what they're doing or feel as fulfilled by what they're doing as that. And I think that's a great blessing and privilege. And I think that's a deep thing that we need to get kind of people to be doing. But I've met people whose, their whole living is, when you're serving Allah Azza Jal, it really gives you a sense of purpose. And that doesn't necessarily have to be directly in the deen. It can be something that's, I'm earning money to give charity, and that charity is the greatest charity, as the Prophet ﷺ described, which is to feed your wife and to put the food on her plate. So
you're
she can eat
saying
and stuff.
husbands should cook for their wives?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Thaqib. So
360 degrees from the start of the episode.
He's a complete progressive husband, unlike some other people in this room.
so long as she's willing to tolerate the quality of food produced, I think that's okay. So,
But anywho, I had a very one of the last questions, inshallah, before we start wrapping up. One question is: so, what is the kind of the next steps of QuranClub, and where do you see it in terms of what's your vision?
So for me, I say this with no hesitation. The vision for me is to change the world. When I became almost obsessed in studying the Prophet ﷺ and learning about his life, because his life is for us to really take and to benefit from and to see. And in the Prophet, you have a living example of a single person who changed the world. And you think, how did he achieve that, and what steps did he do? And taking real life lessons from practical steps and struggles that he went through. So for me, the QuranClub was following in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ. The very first command that he received from Allah wasn't to pray, it wasn't to give charity, it was to read. And he gives the analogy of khalaq, which is this idea of creation. After you kind of reading, he says, "Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq." Read in the name of your Lord. I read the Quran, or read just generally of studying, who created. And creation can literally transform something from nothing into something. And then he says, "Khalaqa al-insana min alaq." He created man from a clot. So change can come instantly, like instant creation, or it can be change which is gradual, like the fetus in the womb. So for me, the QuranClub, the mission is I want to convince every Muslim out there to read Quran and Arab, and I want them to do it consistently every single day. And I say this without any hesitation. If we can get 10,000, 100,000, 1 million people doing that every day, we will cause a spiritual earthquake. We will transform the world in a way that people won't know, because we're getting people to commit to their faith in a consistent manner. And any Muslim that takes a footstep towards Allah, Allah takes 3 towards him. If you come walking to Allah, he comes running to you. And that's not my words. That's Allah's words through the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith Qudsi. So my task is to get Muslims to begin that transformative step in the manner that the Prophet ﷺ began, which is by reading the Quran, and then by educating people, and then by building a community of people gathering together around the Quran, gathering together around their faith. And the beauty of this app is it's all fully thought through. So your reading is raising money for charity. We are giving money for free from your reading of Quran to charity. And you think, wait, how does that work? Well, you literally are offered the option to watch an advert, and the money from you watching that advert will go to charity to raise millions of pounds a day. That money gets reinvested back into the Quran, gets reinvested back into different projects, get reinvested into direct charity to people. And we're building what I call the economic mechanism. So remember the 3 prongs I mentioned: intellectual, spiritual, and economic. So the intellectual was the CIM, the spiritual was the QuranClub. The economic is this mechanism. So we're building a way which we can offer a service entirely for free to people whilst making millions of pounds off the back of it. And hopefully those millions can go towards these kind of great projects and services that we need as a community, inshallah.
One of the common criticisms about, for example, in Ramadan, where we do a khatam in many masajid every Ramadan, but then nobody understands what they're saying. Have you faced that about, your, like the app fundamentally focused on people reading Quran in Arabic, which of course has a spiritual value, but what about actually understanding it? So, a majority of the people reading it, I assume, will not understand what they're reading. How can we change that? B, how much value does that?
So the translation is provided on the app, so you can read the translation alongside the Arabic, and actually we'd encourage people to do that. We've started a 2-minute tafsir series, which I believe you're one of the authors, Thaqib, to contribute this idea of reflecting on the Quran. So we're building a database of short reflections of the Quran, so people, when they read a verse, they can learn some aspect of what this verse is saying on a deeper level. But the idea is exactly what you said. For me, it's not about what the objective is to achieve. The more important question is how to achieve it, which is why I went into strategy consulting in the first place. So I want people to start deeply reflecting on the Quran. You can't get someone who's been disconnected with the Quran for generations or for years and then suddenly get them to read and reflect deeply on the Quran. It's a process, it's a journey. So the first step is to read it. And when that habit becomes inculcated, you can encourage people to start watching a video to reflect on it. You can provide more material to look at different aspects of the verse and so on. So it's about the user journey and getting the community where it should be. But it start on the smallest, most common denominator.
Okay, alhamdulillah. What sort of features do you guys have for people who are like memorizing and kind of trying to collate that or something? Because I know that generally, well, I think most people use standard masahib, so you're memorized, you've got the top of the page, the bottom of the page, you've got like a picture of it. But also, does it like is there like a community hifz or tasmiyah?
So the app itself, I'll run through the actual features that are there, and then I'll go into your question. So the app has probably the most advanced features of any Quran app or any Islamic app that are out there. So every ayah you read contributes to a global khatam or a completion of the Quran taking place in the world right now, no matter where you're reading it. We know every person, every city, every country, every gender, every age of the person reading it, so we can build these really interesting competitions between people. We've got a live leaderboard to tell you which city and which country is reading the most Quran. We've got streaks, so every day you're reading, you're getting rewarded. So I know you guys were going to offer prizes to people who listen to your podcast and quickly withdrew it. But we've got...
Raqib said he is going to.
We've got a competition your listeners might enjoy, which is this idea of a 100-day challenge. So if you can read Quran for 100 days every day, we can reward you with certain prizes and gifts. So being consistent with these things. So we've got the ability to give money to charity for free by watching adverts. You've got the ability to read.
Does that mess up your intention though? Because now if I go on the app and I read for the next 100 days, I'm just thinking about the nice gift hamper that I'm gonna get from QuranClub.
Potentially, but I think. These actions, as Imam Ghazali says, is start them and the intention refines with time. So if a person is going on there for 100 days just to get that kind of prize at the end, then, good thing. But
hopefully
it takes a certain degree of commitment to go online to watch and to read a verse every single day just to get a little gift. I think that's probably worth it. We've thought of the answer for that, by the way. So there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he describes people who come in a gathering remembering Allah. And he sends the angels looking for them, and they find this gathering, and he says, look, forgive every single person in that gathering. And then they go, yeah, but there's this one guy who's just come to pick up his mate, like just meeting his mate. He's not really there. He's just kind of, whatever, because someone invited him in. He goes, look, that gathering's so blessed, everyone's forgiven. So if that person's just coming on our gathering for 100 days just to get that prize, inshallah, if Allah can accept it from them, I'm sure we can give them a prize as well. So that's the answer to that. And you can create your own private groups as well in the app. But to answer your question, this is a journey. I mean, one of the mistakes I think we made in the app is we built too many features too quickly. So a lot of people are quite overwhelmed by it. There's a lot on there. I mean, there's about 15 things that no other app does, and we've got it. So even the groups feature I just skirted over, but you've got a way to create a private khatam or a private group with your family and friends to read the Quran amongst each other. I mean, no other app does that. People are still on the WhatsApp days where you send a list and people take which one they want, or they go to the masjid. You can now do it on an app. So with things like hifz and these sorts of things, we have got incredible ideas planned, but it all depends on whether this app succeeds, inshallah, and then we can move on to building these other features, service the community better.
Because there's alhamdulillah, there's quite a lot of brothers who, for example, when they're younger, when they have so much time, they start off the hifz, and then once they get caught up in the trap of life, I guess, when they struggle to find time between your talab al-ilm as well as balancing work and family life. I guess sometimes they can find it harder to kind of spend more time to completing the hifz. And hopefully, like for example, the most common advice given is having a teacher, having someone to make sure that they're following you up. So one thing I'm really hoping is that from this app, for example, it attracts that audience of people who are looking for that, and then they can find a solution through this app, and it actually helps them, motivates them to kind of go back to doing their hifz and hopefully completing it.
Yeah,
inshallah.
I mean, a lot of people have been reconnected with reading the Quran in the way they weren't before, but there is a big challenge in our hands. I think we've trying to encourage people to memorize the Quran as well as reading it is very important, and Islamic knowledge is very important. So the best advice I've heard, and I think the most important advice for memorizing, is actually having a routine. So finding a consistency in doing something, because even after you've memorized the Quran, you still need to retain it. So only those who have a routine are the ones that are able to retain it. So what we're instilling people is a routine. It's this idea of a consistent daily action in reading the Quran. And then you can easily transfer that in using the most advanced technologies that are around there and techniques to help people memorize the Quran, which is what we're looking into right now. It becomes really exciting, but it depends if it's successful or not. Inshallah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So that's quite good, and I think I've got a lot of questions about use cases, but I'm sure I can tinker around. But the app's available on iOS, Android, Windows Mobile?
So not on Windows Mobile, but it's on iOS and Android. So you can download it for free. So everything I've mentioned so far is free for you to use. It doesn't cost you anything. We're doing a campaign at the moment to raise funds for the cyclone that's just happened in Mozambique and Idea. So we're asking people to donate through that. You can donate for free by watching an advert. So you don't even have to pay anything. You just go there, watch an ad, and money goes to charity. Or alternatively, you can go on there and actually give cash donations as well. So we've got a charity partnership. This idea of unity is what we're trying to build. So the charities are working together to deliver the aid. So we've got Islamic Relief, Human Appeal and Muslim Aid on board at the moment. And they're working together in a collaborative way to raise funds. And we're doing a big Ramadan push to get people to read their khatam of Quran this Ramadan with us, because we want to read 1 million pages on the app. So hopefully all your users...
How many khatams does that translate? So like, what is it? Standard Quran is 600 pages, 604 pages. So 1 million will be like... I don't know if you have that.
1,000.
Oh, wow.
Just under 1,000.
Okay, so it's...
You can do the maths on your mobile.
Yeah,
it's
it's
achievable.
between 1,000 and 2,000, but even then it's...
So, okay, 1,700 people need to sign up and do a khatam.
Yeah,
And,
so it's really important. Like, literally, the crux of our whole model is that people will sign up and read Quran with us and commit to the vision that we have.
Can I log them? If I did some pages like on like a mushaf, on like a physical mushaf, can I log them on?
You can. Yeah, you can just go on the app and go. So you set up a My Khatam. My Khatam is your own personal progress. Right? It starts from the Fatiha and goes all the way to the thing. Or if you're already midway through one, you can just continue it on the app, and it tells you to set that up. But then when you read in your own book, you can just come back on the app and log it. But if you're reading on your book, you're reading by yourself. If you're reading on our app, you're reading in a community. And there's a lot of benefits from the Prophet ﷺ of reading together. And it's mentioned in the hadith of the virtues of reading Quran together and studying it together. So anything, Allah says, the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah, that Allah is with the congregation, with the group. So being with other people is very important. The social aspect. Remember the hadith, of the Prophet ﷺ about establishing that community and brotherhood through salam and so on.
So Jazakallah khair for that. That's really insightful, and so I encourage everyone to go on, download QuranClub, and make that your regular kind of Quran app. And with that, I think it's time to conclude. So follow us or you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, which I've recently found out, and as well as Spotify. You can email us on middlewestpc@gmail.com or follow us on Facebook or Twitter at the Middle West PC. Jazakumullah khair. Rate us 5 out of 5 on iTunes. So the ratings help the podcast rise up in the search rankings, which will make us your favorite podcast become higher kind of and spread far and wide.
Spread the news. If you enjoy listening to us, then tell your friends and tell their friends and then tell their friends.
You don't have to tell everyone. They can tell their friends. But anyways, that's it. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.